The Fox Spirit, A Forbidden Love. Part 2 of 3. I am a fox spirit, ageless, wandering through centuries like a shadow. For 1,000 years I have drifted, a silent observer longing for the human world, but never daring to touch it. That was until I saw him, this human man with dark, thoughtful eyes, carrying a sadness that mirrored my own. He was unlike any other, and against all my instincts I allowed myself to cross into his world. Our meeting was brief but sweet, an accidental encounter beneath the moonlight. In those fleeting moments I felt something I had never experienced before. Connection. It was simple, unspoken, yet magical. He had spoken to me, shared his thoughts with me, and in his presence, I had felt seen. I had told myself it was enough, that it was perfect, in its brevity. A moment to savor, but not to repeat. For days afterward, I revelled in the memory of that night, replaying our conversation in my mind. I felt light, like I was floating through the world, my heart warmed by the memory of his smile, his kind eyes. It was enough, more than I could have ever hoped for. I told myself that I had tasted the joy of the human world, and now it was time to return to my place in the shadows. But as the days passed, the warmth of that memory began to fade, replaced by something deeper, something I had tried to bury. Longing. No matter how hard I tried to push it aside, I found myself thinking of him. My thoughts drifted back to the river, to the way his voice had sounded in the quiet night. And before I could stop myself, I began to watch him again. I told myself it was harmless, just watching, nothing more. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself yearning for more. My heart ached with the same familiar longing I had carried for centuries, but now it had a face, a name. And as much as I tried to convince myself that one meeting had been enough, the truth lingered in my chest like a heavy weight. I wanted to see him again. It was foolish, I knew, dangerous even, but the pull was too strong, and I was powerless against it. He had become a part of me now, woven into the fabric of my thoughts, and, no matter how hard I tried to resist, I found myself returning to the idea of him, of us. So one night I made the decision. One more meeting couldn't hurt, I told myself, just one more. It would be enough to quell the ache in my heart, to feel that sweetness again, if only for a little while longer. I knew that he was a scholar, that he had a passion for the arts, poetry, calligraphy, painting. I had seen the way he cherished his books, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about them. So, I set out into the world, searching for something I knew would bring him joy. I wandered through the markets, invisible among the mortals, gathering the finest books I could find, collections of poetry, delicate calligraphy, beautiful paintings, all bound in leather and silk. These were treasures, things of great value, but to me they were simply tools. When I had what I needed, I returned to the river, waiting for him to arrive. It didn't take long. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I saw him walking along the familiar path, his eyes distant as always, lost in thought. But when he saw me standing by the water, his entire face lit up with a mixture of surprise and joy. "I didn't think I would see you again," he said, his voice filled with a warmth that sent a soft flutter through my heart. I smiled, feeling that familiar sweetness bloom inside me once more. "I thought the same," I lied gently, the words slipping easily from my lips. "But I brought something for you, something I thought you might enjoy." His eyes widened in surprise as I revealed the books I had gathered, each one more beautiful than the last. He reached out, hesitant but eager, his fingers brushing the delicate covers. "These are incredible," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Where did you get these?" I hesitated for a moment, then spun a careful lie. "They're from my family's collection," I said softly. Old, rare, but no one in my family ever bothers with them. They use them more for decoration than anything else. I thought you might appreciate them more. He looked at me with such gratitude, such excitement, that I almost felt guilty for the lie. But the joy in his eyes was worth it. I I don't know what to say, he stammered, his hands lingering on the books as though they were priceless treasures. Thank you. I never expected anything like this. I watched him carefully, my heart swelling at the sight of his happiness. This was enough, I told myself. This moment, this joy I had given him, it would be enough to carry me through the long years of solitude that lay ahead. But then, as the conversation drifted and we spoke of poetry, of art, of life, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. It was subtle at first, but with every passing moment, it grew clearer. A softness, a warmth, a connection that mirrored my own. He had fallen for me, just as I had fallen for him. As the night wore on and the moon climbed higher in the sky, I could see the hesitation in his voice, the way he lingered on his words, as though he didn't want the moment to end. Will I see you again? He asked quietly, his voice barely more than a whisper. I hesitated, my heart racing in my chest. I had told myself that one more meeting would be enough, that this would be the last time. But the look in his eyes, the quiet plea in his voice, it broke something inside me. Yes, I whispered softly, the words slipping from my lips before I could stop it. You will. The relief in his eyes was instant, and he smiled, a smile that made my heart ache with a sweetness I had never known before. We parted that night, but I knew it wouldn't be the last time. I could feel it in the air between us, in the way our hearts seemed to beat in time with one another. We had crossed a line, one that could not be undone. Over the next few weeks, we met more frequently, our conversations growing deeper, more intimate. We spoke of dreams, of hopes, of things neither of us had shared with anyone else. Though we never touched, there was a closeness between us that felt more real than anything I had ever known. We were like lovers in everything but name, bound together by a connection that neither of us could fully understand. And though I knew it was dangerous, though I knew it couldn't last, I couldn't bring myself to let go. As the days turned into weeks, our meetings became more frequent, more intimate. Every time we met by the river, under the soft glow of the moon, there was an unspoken tension between us, something that hummed in the air, pulling us closer, yet always keeping us apart. It was dangerous, I knew. The closer we became, the harder it was to keep up the illusion of my human form. The magic that concealed my true self, the fox with 9 tails, grew weaker each time we met. Whenever his hand drifted too close to mine or his gaze lingered on me for too long, I could feel the strain, my control slipping just for a moment before I managed to pull it back into place. But as our bond deepened, it became harder to resist. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at me with a quiet longing, the way his words grew softer, more intimate with each passing night. And I felt it too, a deep, undeniable pull that made my heart ache with both joy and fear. I knew I couldn't let him touch me. Even the briefest contact would weaken the magic, revealing the truth I had worked so hard to hide. So every time his hand would drift too close, I would slip away, moving gracefully, like the wind, always just out of reach. The awkwardness that followed each near touch was palpable, a silence that hung between us like a heavy mist. I could feel the tension growing, the frustration in his eyes, and I knew that words would not be enough to fill the space between us. So, one night, in the midst of that awkward silence, I made a decision. Would you like to see me dance? I asked, my voice soft, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He blinked, surprised by the sudden question. Dance? I nodded, trying to hide the nervousness that fluttered in my chest. Yes, it's something I've always loved to do. It helps me think, helps me express things that words cannot. He smiled then, the tension easing from his face. I'd love to see that. And so I danced for him. That first night, it was simple. Slow, graceful movements beneath the moonlight, my body flowing like water, each step a silent expression of the things I could never say aloud. I poured my emotions into every turn, every sway of my arms, letting the dance speak for me. It was my way of deflecting the closeness that had become so dangerous, my way of keeping him at a safe distance, even as my heart yearned for more. He watched me in silence, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name, something that made my heart ache with both longing and fear. When I finished, he smiled softly, the same gentle smile that always seemed to ease the tension between us. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice full of awe. I bowed my head slightly, hiding the turmoil that swirled within me. "Thank you." From that night on, the dance became our routine. We would talk, sometimes for hours, about art, poetry, dreams, and the things that filled our souls. And then, when the conversation became too heavy, when the unspoken tension between us became too much, I would dance. Each night, the dance grew more intricate, more personal. It was my way of speaking to him without words, of expressing the depth of my feelings without risking the truth of who I was. And each night, as I danced, I could feel our bond growing stronger, the invisible thread between us pulling tighter with every passing moment. But with every dance, the distance between us became harder to maintain. I could see the way he watched me, his eyes filled with a longing that mirrored my own. I could feel the pull between us, the quiet desperation in both our hearts. And then, one night, it happened. We had been talking for hours, sitting side by side beneath the stars, our words flowing as easily as the river beside us. I could feel the pull between us stronger than ever before, and I knew he felt it too. His eyes lingered on me, soft and searching, as though he was seeing me in a way he hadn't before. And then, before I could stop him, he reached out. A gentle touch, his fingers brushing against mine. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. My heart raced in my chest, a surge of warmth flooding through me. His touch was soft, tentative, but filled with an unmistakable tenderness. I felt myself leaning into it, drawn to him in a way I had never been before. And then, as if guided by some unspoken force, he leaned in closer. Our lips met, a soft, delicate kiss beneath the moonlight. In that instant, the world around us fell away, and all I could feel was him, his warmth, his presence, the depth of our connection. It was everything I had longed for, everything I had feared. But as the kiss deepened, I felt it, the magic slipping. No matter how hard I tried to hold on to the illusion, it was too late. The kiss had broken something inside me, something fragile and uncontrollable. I felt my human form falter, felt the familiar weight of my tails unfurling behind me, the sharpness of my fox features breaking through the soft lines of my human face. For just a brief moment, I was no longer the woman he thought he knew. I was the fox. His eyes widened in shock as he pulled back, staring at me in disbelief. I could see it in his face, the confusion, the fear, the way his mind was struggling to make sense of what he had just seen. What are you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, his breath catching in his throat. Panic surged through me. I had never wanted him to know, never wanted him to see the creature I truly was. But now, it was too late. He had seen me. He knew. Without thinking, I stumbled back, my heart racing, the magic snapping back into place as I forced myself into human form once more. But it didn't matter. He had seen the truth, and no amount of illusion could take that moment back. "I'm sorry," I breathed, my voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." And then, Before he could say another word, I turned and ran as fast as I could, my tails flickering behind me as I disappeared into the shadows of the night. The sound of his voice calling after me echoed in my ears, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had crossed a line I could never undo, and now there was no turning back. That's all for tonight. If you enjoy my bedtime stories, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for joining me tonight.